Let's go to another example. So far we've talked about one where the seller finances the whole thing. Then we've talked about one where the seller finances none because there was very little equity. Now let's split the difference. Let's go somewhere in the middle because you're going to run across these two. In this case, a seller calls you with a house in good condition worth $175,000. There's a no qualifying loan for $82,000 with a payment of $855.20 per month, and that includes taxes and insurance. Seller's asking $175 cash. What was it worth? $175 cash. Okay, or $175. Upon questioning, you learn she would consider carrying a second for her equity if she gets $15,000 down. So there is a $82,000 loan on it. She wants $15,000 down, and she wants you to assume a $82,000 no qualifying loan. Now, is that the key word here? This one is no qualifying, folks. When you find a loan that is a no qualifying loan, there is nothing stopping you from assuming it. So you don't have to worry about this due on sale clause crap, because the term no qualifying in itself means there is no due on sale clause in the mortgage or the trust deed, and that's what makes it no qualifying. So you don't have to worry about due on sale clause in this situation. And there's an awful lot of loans still out there that do not require qualifying. And here's how you can determine them quickly. If it's an FHA loan and it was closed prior to December 15th, 1989, it does not require qualifying. If it's a VA loan and it was closed March 1st, 1988 or prior, it does not require qualifying. That means that you can assume them, Mickey Mouse could assume them, corporation could assume them, any entity could assume the loans without anyone's permission but the seller's. December 15th, 89. So all you have to do is determine if the loan predates that, and you'll know if it's qualifying or not. Okay? Our seller's asking retail price. They want $15,000 down, and they want us to assume the $82,000 loan, which is not a problem in this case, regardless of what kind of credit we have. Frankly, nobody's going to pull our credit anyway, so it's really irrelevant. It doesn't require credit to assume a no qualifying loan. Seller wants to take back a second at 9% for 15 years, so we construct the following offer. Mr. Seller, we'll give you $160,000 for the house. You were asking $175. $160 is the best we can do. We have to have a way to make a profit. And I have no problem at all acquainting the seller with the fact that I intend to make a profit, or I have no reason to do business with them. Now, they're calling on my ad that says I buy houses. Okay? And this is a scenario. Hello.
Hi, you have an ad in the paper for a house?
Yes, I do. My name is Ron. Yours?
Ray.
You notice how I always come back with that same answer. First thing I want to know is their name, so that I can talk to them by name. Okay, Ray, how can I help you?
Well, I like the idea that there was no qualifying.
Okay. Well, you're my seller, Ray.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so anxious to buy houses.
Show me, didn't you? Okay.
I'm so anxious to buy them.
You're calling on my I Buy House ad.
Yes, you buy houses. I have a house for.
That means, all right, you're calling me, so I'm now asking you the questions. Okay? I ask Ray the questions, and I find out that he's asking $175, and that he owes $82, and that he's willing to take $78 back on a second. He's moving to Waterloo, Iowa, and he's got to leave in a couple of weeks or a month or whatever. And now I'm trying to get him to. I found out that I have a reason to go out to his house. Now I'm sitting in his living room, and now we're working out this solution. I tell you what, even better than that, let's pre-qualify him before I even go to his house. Here's how that's going to go. Ray, you called on my ad. You know I'm not going to live in your house, correct?
Well, that's true.
Okay. I'm looking to make a profit on your house, Ray, and I will do that in a manner which hopefully will get you what you want. My profit will come from my buyer, but I hope you understand that if I don't make a profit, I really got any reason to get involved.
Oh, that makes sense.
That makes sense? I never have a problem with that. Never had a seller disagree with that. Okay? So immediately I've set the stage. Ray, you're asking $175,000 for a house that you say is worth $175,000. I don't see any way in the world I can make a profit unless we can create some kind of financing here that will allow me to make money. And the only way I can do that, is first of all, I've got to get a price at least a little below absolute top retail value. And the second, you're asking for $15,000 down, Ray. And frankly, I can't give you $15,000 down on a house worth $175,000 and be able to make a profit, because the truth is, what I intend to do is put an owner-occupant in the house and do a wraparound mortgage on it, or a land contract, or whatever, or wherever state I'm in, that Ray will understand. If Ray lives in California, he'll understand trust deeds, won't he? If he lives in Michigan, he'll understand mortgages, won't he? If he lives in Ohio, he'll understand land contracts, won't he? Okay. Wherever I live, we'll use that terminology. And the only way I can see I can make a profit here, Ray, is if I get more down from my buyer than I have to pay you, the seller, as a down payment. You can understand that, can't you?
I don't have a problem with that.
Okay. Well, based on that, I know before I come out that I can't pay you $15,000 simply because I know I'd have a miserable time getting more than that from my buyer. So, what I'm saying, Ray, is I can come out and take a look. If your house qualifies, and if you're flexible, I can work out probably one, maybe two, three different offers I can give you. But I can tell you before I come, I cannot give you $175,000. I've got to get a little less than that at least, and I can't give you $15,000. I've got to get that reduced. Based on what I've told you, should I come look?
Well, yeah, I priced it based on owner-occupant, but if I've got to sell it to a investor, I understand I got to come down.
Oh, you do?
Oh, yeah.
Boy, he's easy, isn't he?
Well, I've got to move fast.
Well, it's either one of two things. Either Ray tells me to come look, or he doesn't. In either case, have I saved a trip if he says no? Okay. If he says yes, have I generated some flexibility? Does this mean that he is about ready to blow his brains out? No. He doesn't have to be that motivated. He has to be motivated enough to do business and want to work something and that it isn't all one-sided, or I ain't got time for him. Period. Okay? So then I'm out to the house and we create this solution. Ray, I can give you $160,000 based on the market analysis of your house. Frankly, I think you're a little high, but I think it is worth a little more than $160,000. I told you before I left I had to have a little bit of break. Okay? By the way, I'm not stealing your house, am I?
No.
Absolutely not. Ray, you asked for $15,000 down. I can give you 10. I would rather not give you that, but I can give you 10. So really, we don't have much of a gap to overcome here, do we?
No,
right?
not.
It's in one of them nothing down deals, is it, Ray?
No, and there's no realtor involved. So
no realtor involved. So this will work out. You'll get all the money other than your share of closing costs. Okay, I'll assume your loan in the process, and I'll give you a $68,000 second mortgage back at 6% for 30 years. Now, I'm not going to offer Ray no 10-year balloon. But Ray's going to come back and say, 30 years, that's a long time. I say, well, what do you suggest, Ray? He's going to say, well, what about a 5-year balloon? I'm going to say, make it 10, Ray, and we got a deal.
I'm going to say yes.
Okay? Payment of $407.69. So that means I'm going to be paying $855 plus $407, doesn't it? All right? And a total outgoing payment of $1,262, and that is PITI, isn't it? Because his first mortgage is PITI. All right? By the way, Ray, I want the interest to begin in 3 months on this, which means that your first payment will be in 4 months. Is that a problem? I'll go ahead and start making this immediately. Is that a problem?
It's a problem, but I can live with it.
You can live with it? Boy, he's easy. I like him.
Oh, it's my money.
We got a deal here.
As long as you're making the first.
What if it is a problem? Ray says, man, you want me to wait 4 months for that money? Why? I'm going to say, because I need time to find me a good buyer, Ray. You do want me to find a good buyer, don't you?
Oh, yes.
Okay. By the way, Ray, are you telling me now that if I have to make this payment, it's either I make this payment now or we don't have a deal?
Well, I was hoping that, I could stand a couple of months. But 4 months is a little far out.
Well, Ray, how much are you getting per month on your equity now?
Well, I'm not getting anything on it now, but
So if I walk out the door and we don't do business, you'll keep on getting what you're getting, won't you?
yes.
You think maybe you could just wait 4 months for me so you can start getting $407 every month and not have to worry about it anymore?
Well, if you walk out the door now, you don't get to sell it to another buyer.
Well, now that is true, Ray. I split the difference, 2 months, all right? Huh?
Yeah, I can live with that.
We still friends, Ray?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. That's the first time anybody's ever come back with that smart answer, Ray.
You want to know where I heard it?
All right. Anyway, we got a deal. What are we going to do with the house now? Let's look. Let's see. What are we going to sell it for? I ain't going to show you. What do we say it appraised for? 175. What are we selling it for? 165, right? 185. Let's see what I chose. Look at that. You're getting good, man. 185. We're going to sell it for 185. Going to get a down payment of $20,000 on a $185,000 house, incidentally. Is that going to be a hard feat? Folks, you get a lot bigger down payment than that, trust me. A lot bigger than that on $185,000. Can you imagine this house now in Cleveland? This is the mansion on the hill, isn't it, John? Huh? $185,000 house. Now in L.A., either way, even if it's in L.A. and it's a Cracker Jack box, is a $20,000 down payment going to be a slam dunk to get on no qualifying deal? You bet. Absolutely. Anybody looking for a $175,000 house can expect to have at least $120,000 no matter how they intend to buy it. Okay? So we're going to do we're going to sell it for 185, we're going to take 20 down, and we're going to do a wraparound or a land contract or a trust deed or some document for 165. That's 185 less 20. We're going to have our buyer make us payments of $1,628.52 a month, PITI, on a $185,000 house. Is that payment too high? Nope. That's a very good payment. Okay? That means we're going to be collecting $1,628 and paying out $1,262. That means we get $365 per month profit from that payment spread. For how long? At least 10 years. Okay? Or maybe longer. Maybe longer. Suppose the 10 years goes by and my buyer hasn't refinanced or sold. Ray, I've been making payments on this house for 10 years. My buyer can't qualify for a new loan. Would you like to stretch this out, or would you like that house back?
Well, what's the increase in real estate been in that area?
Boy, I don't know, Ray, but I'm going to tell you one thing. I don't know what kind of shape this house would be in when I get this buyer out here. Boy, he knows that balloon's coming due. He getting nasty. But you think maybe we can work out something to where you can extend that balloon for another 5 years?
Well, I've kind of gotten used to the payments.
Okay, good. That's what I want to hear, Ray.
Well, actually, my wife has gotten used to the payments. It's
What
buying her the new car.
Oh, okay. If the 10 years goes by, who am I dealing with here come balloon time? With who? An individual. Do I always have flexibility? Yeah. Do you think Ray really wants this house back? Oh, it's possible, isn't it? But not very likely. Ray's going to extend the note. Or he can call a loan due if my buyer can't buy. Whatever. What do I lose?
You lose the spread that you've been getting.
I lose that monthly spread, don't I? I already got my upfront cash. I've been collecting payments for 10 years. That's the worst case scenario, isn't it? Did I personally sign on this note and guarantee this note to Ray? Nope. My trust did. Therefore, if Ray wants the house back, he'll have to take the house back. If I can't make any other arrangements with him, that's the absolute worst case scenario. I've never had that happen, but I suppose it could where you live. Okay, so we made $10,000 profit going in, $15,000 when my buyer refinances, and of course, now we're going to get to the discount here. Let's assume now that it's been 2.8 years, which is the average time, by the way, that houses are sold in this country. and my buyer has sold the property to somebody else, and they were going down to the bank and they're getting a new loan, and I get notified that they want a payoff letter. Now, if I'm doing a wraparound mortgage or land contract or whatever, who do they notify? They notify me. Okay? Now it is my responsibility to go to Ray and get a payoff letter, isn't it? So watch closely. First of all, does Ray know now that this house is being sold? No. It's been 2.8 years. All he knows is he's getting $407 a month. I get notified that my buyer's ready to sell. Ray, you know I've been making you payments for 2.5 years now. And I've been thinking about you. But I've also coming into some money here pretty shortly. And I got to decide what to do with it. Now, Ray, I'm always looking for a good return on my investment. Frankly, I owe you money at 6%. Man, I have to think real hard on whether I would want to ever pay that off. But I do have a choice, Ray. I can pay you off if you make it worth my while, or I can go put the money in something else. So, Ray, would you rather continue getting $407 a month payments until you grow old? Or what do I owe you, Ray? What do I owe him?
62 less the...
I owe him 68. 68, okay?
68.
Or would you rather have $40,000 cash now to do with as you see fit?
40 is an awful big hit.
Big hit?
Yeah, it's a big hit on that. You know, I've got ads in the paper here locally where I live now, and they buy second mortgages at a discount. And I'm not sure I'd have to discount it that much.
Well, you want to find out and call me back?
Well,
because folks,
could
he
you
will
go
discount
44?
it that much. They'll clean his clock. I know that, you see, and because I'm telling you right now, nobody's going to buy that paper at a higher than a 75% loan to value, and they're going to knock him down to below 40 most likely on that note. He'll find that out. I just soon he did. You want to call me back on that, Ray?
Well, if we could save a call and some things, if you could go, if you could go 44.
44? So you're telling me if I raised it to 44, you'd take $44,000 cash now instead of payments for the next 7 years or so?
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
How about 42? 42, and I'll have you the money in a few days. Done. If I owe him 68, and he just told me he'd take 42, didn't I just make $26,000? Yeah. For doing what? For wagging my tongue. The highest paid profession in America, as Chet said. Do you think sellers do this in real life? Last week, I had a balloon call due on me with a 5-year note. I went and refinanced the balloon with a private loan. I had a second mortgage on there to a seller. I've been paying that seller for 5 years, $250 a month at no interest. I wrote the seller a letter, something like, I've got a balloon coming due on the 1st. You're in second. I got to refinance that balloon. I can't do it. Can't qualify for no low interest loan. The only way I can get it refinanced is if I do a high interest loan, and that's going to make the payments too high for me to continue renting it out and be able to pay it and pay you. So we got a problem. I have several choices. I can pay you. I'll have $3,500 left out of that loan to pay you if you will accept that as a complete payoff. Now, I owed him $12,500. Or if you wish, I'll be glad to deed the property back to you because I sure don't want to put you through foreclosure to protect your interest. There's a tenant in it. The tenant is paying $495 a month, and I'm sure they would continue to keep on paying if you wanted the property back. If you decide to take the $3,500 as a complete payoff, would you sign the letter attached and return it to me? I attached a letter that said, I agree to accept $3,500 as full and complete payoff on my loan on 9031 Monroe Avenue. I had a place for him to sign and her to sign because the note was in both of their names. I also put a P.S. I said, P.S. My loan commitment expires Friday. If you intend to do something, I need an answer quick. I FedExed the letter to them. I got it back the next day by FedEx signed. So we paid $3,500 for a $12,500 note. In the hundreds of seller carryback notes that I have done over the years, not one single time have I ever failed to get a discount when it was time to pay them off. Not once. Not once. And I'll show you why a seller would be absolutely ignorant not to take the discount. And so would you. Anytime you can get cash now, it is worth a lot more than payments strung out over a period of years. And I'll show you why in just a moment. First of all, why do sellers discount? To tell you the truth, most of them discount just so they can get cash in their hands, period. They don't need a reason. They don't have to worry about converting it to numbers. But let's look at, let's try to convert it to numbers for a more sophisticated seller and see if it makes sense for them to do so. Let's take a $135,000 note, for example. You remember that example one we did a while ago where we created a $135,000 note back to the seller? This one here. We bought the house for $140, gave them $5 down, and gave them $135 back. Let's use that example right there. And now it's time, 2.8 years, to discount that note. All right? Let's just see the seller's choices here. 7%, 10 years, they have a payment. In 10 years, their payment of $880 some odd dollars a month, whatever it was, will yield them $107,779 in payments. That's simply 120 times their payment. In addition to that, at the end of that 10-year balloon, they'll be owed $115,000 in principal. You add those two together, the seller's total yield on that would be $223,000 over a 10-year period. And that is not compounded, is it? That is straight payments added to the balloon balance. Okay? Show your seller that $100,000 cash could be reloaned to you at 12.5% simple interest. Isn't this a good opportunity for the seller to loan the money back to you at 12.5% or whatever you can agree upon so that you can go out and use it to buy junkers? So in other words, we're creating our own private lenders here from people who used to be sellers. If you've been paying them and you've been paying them on time, do they have any reason to suspect that you wouldn't continue doing so? If you've been paying them at 7%, do you think they might like 12.5% a little bit better? Hello? If you had a loan secured on a property that you owed $135 on, you only paid $140, you had a loan on it at 98% loan to value, do you think they'd feel safer if they now loaned you money on other property at 50, 60, or 70% loan to value? Can you see the motivation for the seller doing this? Well, let's see what it means in the way of dollars. If they loan the money to you at 12.5% on a much shorter term than 10 years, simple interest, 60 to 70% loan to value, it'll net them $225,000 over the same 10 years. Their advantages is a safer loan, a higher return, and a better liquidity. So in other words, that seller could take a $35,000 discount, take $100,000, up the ante to 12.5% and get the exact same yield, but get a lot of other advantages in the bargain. Your advantage is you get a $35,000 cash from the discount and $100,000 of easy money to go buy wholesale properties, which I hope you'll make a ton of money with if you do that as well. Kill two birds with one stone. You made $35,000, you set yourself up with a $100,000 pool of funds to borrow back when you go find junkers. Or, suppose this seller doesn't want to play that game. Can you show this seller that if they take this same money and invest it in a 10% mutual fund and let it compound, and you can show this seller, once you learn how to work your financial calculator, that it will only take a total of $86,000 to net them $223,000 over a period of 10 years invested at 10% compounded. So in other words, we owe them 135. Couldn't you show them that they could take 86, invested in a mutual fund and forget about it, and make the same money that they're making on their 135? You think they'd feel safer in a mutual fund or in this loan at 98.8% loan to value, whatever it is? Now, I'm not suggesting that you try to discount them all the way from 135 to 86, am I? Nah. But if it only takes 86 to get them the same yield as the 135, what if you offer them 100? Say, look, you not only get the same yield, you're going to get $14,000 more in the process. Or, what if you happen to be in a private loan business where you're soliciting funds to loan out to other people at 15% interest, for which you collect 10 points every time you make a loan, as I do? Wouldn't this be a nice use for this seller's funds at 15% interest? You show this seller that you can make a private loan for $90,000 at 15% and net them over a period of 10 years the same $225,000 they would if they left it in that poorly secured mortgage at 98% loan to value. If you can get that seller to discount at $90,000, you just made $40,000 for wagging your tongue. Suppose you only get them to come down 20 grand. Isn't that more than you made when you sold the property to begin with? Hello? Suppose all of these fail. Can you imagine owing somebody 135 grand, calling them up and offering them cash, and not getting them to take some kind of a discount? Would you? Would you? If you understood money, you would. You understood money, you would. That is, unless you knew that the house was being sold and you're going to get paid off anyway. If your seller finds that out, you're dead in the water. Yes. You mean I've sold it and then they file and they don't make me payments? Okay. In that particular case, you would have to foreclose them out, or you could get them to deed it back to you, which would be the most profitable thing for you to do. And even if they're in bankruptcy, if they don't have any equity or very little equity or even quite a bit of equity, any court would approve that. Okay. Now, if they got a bunch of liens or judgments against them and they can't deed it back to you, then first of all, you screwed up because you didn't protect yourself going in accordingly. Chances are good that well, that's not true. They could have this house 2 or 3 years and have problems on down the line. So that's something you may not be able to prevent. However, when you're dealing with land contracts, for example, or agreement for deeds, a lien or a judgment against your buyer does not attach to the property because they do not hold title to the property. A land contract and an agreement for deed simply says that you pay me X number of dollars per month at X percent interest until it's paid off. When it's paid off, I give you the deed. Do you all follow that? Therefore, if the deed is not vested in the buyer's name, a lien against the buyer will not attach to the property. This is why in the state of Florida, I use agreement for deeds to sell properties and take back notes. And that's the only reason. Because in this state, on agreement for deed, I have to foreclose to get it back if I can't get a deed anyway. So I could physically sell it and take back a wraparound mortgage and not be in any better position, except that if I sell it, take back a wraparound mortgage, and they get a judgment against them, it will attach to the house, because when I take back a wraparound mortgage, I have delivered the deed to the buyer, and the buyer now owns the property. When I do an agreement for deed, I have not delivered a deed, so a judgment will not attach to the house because they don't technically own it. They have an equitable interest in it. In a land contract state like Ohio and many, many others, same thing. You only deliver the deed when the agreement has been fulfilled Therefore, if that buyer doesn't have possession of the deed, if the deed is not recorded in their name, a lien against them cannot attach to the property. Does any of that make sense?
Yep.
Yes. Okay. In the case of a trust deed, I'm not sure. If you take title and you give back the seller a trust deed, will a lien against you attach to the house? Anybody know? If that is true, then I probably would use a land contract or some land installment contract instead of the trust deed. In the state of Ohio, you sell on a land contract and the buyer don't pay, 30, 45 days, you have them on the street. We're not so fortunate in Florida. We're still 4 months away, and we have to file foreclosure and pay the same kind of fees, even with an agreement for deed. So you will learn in this module, there will be several tapes on the documents to use to transfer title and take back paper. All that will be covered in those documents and those tapes to learn how to use those documents. Okay, any other questions to this point? All right, let's continue on here. How can I get the seller to accept payments when they want cash? All right, some of you are going to get this. And some of you it's going to go whew. You can generate cash from any debt instrument, whether it be land contract, trust deed, agreement for deed, wraparound mortgage, or whatever. You can generate cash by selling off a portion of the note. You can sell off as many payments as it takes to generate the amount of cash the seller wants. As soon as those payments are collected by the person or entity you sell them to, the remainder of the note will revert back to the seller. This is very common. This is nothing new. This is nothing weird. This happens all over the country every day. It's very easy for you to arrange the purchase of a portion of that note. In fact, in this module will be a list of buyers for those payments if you wish to do that. How many people in this room would buy portions of notes or are able to sell them to note buyers? Okay, hold your hands up. Hi. Gosh, a bunch of you. So you understand what I'm talking about? And so it's not going to be difficult to sell off these notes, but let's see how we're going to go about this. Step one, determine how much cash they need to solve their problem. Okay? Step two is contact a paper buyer to get a current acceptable yield, and then use a financial calculator to figure out how many payments they must give up to receive the desired cash and an acceptable yield to a paper buyer. An example, seller taking back a note of $100,000 at 7% for 30 years with a payment of $665.30 needs $25,000 in cash now. Now, since you're not going to bring that cash to the closing, you need an alternative plan to generate that cash for the seller. To determine how many payments they must sell, follow these steps on your calculator. You put in the $25,000 that they need now and you press the PV button for present value. You then put in the payment that is already existing on the note. Then you put in the yield in which your note buyer says is acceptable that they will buy that note at. You will find that a 15% yield is acceptable just about any day and time. The truth is, right now, you can sell off paper considerably less than that, all the way down to 12% and maybe even lower. In our example, we're going to use 15%. All I'm saying here is that this 7% note is not going to be attractive to a paper buyer at 7%. In order for the paper buyer to get the 15% yield that they require, they're going to have to discount these payments to where if they loan the money out at 15%, they would get the same kind of return. So all we have to do is figure out how many months of payments at $665.30 for $25,000 does it take to equal a 15% return on that investment. And the answer, by solving for the number, equals 52. It takes 52 payments at $665 a month to get a 15% return on your $25,000 investment. Who missed it? Yes.
If I understand this correctly, you've sat down with a seller, said I want to buy your house owner financing, but they need $25,000 cash now. So instead of using your own money, you're going to a note buyer to figure out a way to get the $25,000 cash, and they're giving up payments.
Yep.
Fantastic.
In fact, Kevin, follow this through. In my example, didn't I buy the house for $140 with 5 down?
Yes.
If I can show that seller how they can get this 25, may I even create this thing with nothing down?
Yep.
As long as I get them their 25. Well, what if they need 50?
Still works.
All I got to do is change the $25,000 to 50, use the same formula, and it'll take more payments to get them 50. All I got to say is, you tell me how much cash you want, and I'll tell you how many payments you have to give up to get it.
So at the end of 4 1/3 years, they're going to start getting their payments back.
That's correct. They're going to start getting payments again. And then I'm going to go on to say, you know something, Ray? When that 52 months is up, if you want, we'll sell off another chunk for you and get you some more cash. Or you can just keep on collecting the payments, whatever you wish. You contact the paper buyer and you arrange a purchase of the payments at closing or shortly thereafter.
What are they called?
Well, they're called mortgage bankers. They're called finance companies. You know, the finance companies where you live will buy this paper in a heartbeat. Many of them. You don't have to look very far to buy people who buy payments, folks. People who buy income streams are all over the place. They're in your newspaper. They says, I buy trust deeds or I buy mortgages. They're in your yellow pages in the form of finance companies. Mortgage brokers all over the land do this. And guess what? I do it. So if you need somebody to buy paper in this kind of a scenario, you ain't got to look far. Don't worry about selling the payments. That's going to be a piece of cake in this case. Look at this from the note buyer's point of view, folks. What loan-to-value ratio is this note buyer into this deal for? He has a $25,000 investment, and in fact, he happens to be in first position on a $140,000 sale. Is he at any risk whatsoever? Hello? None. Absolutely not. This is a piece of cake to sell. Most of the note buyers wouldn't even care who's making these payments. They wouldn't even care about the credit. They wouldn't care about nothing. This loan to value is so low it's irrelevant. They're in first position because if this thing goes into default, they get their $25,000 back before the seller gets any money. Okay? Now the seller owns a piece of this note. They're only buying a partial of this note. So the seller's not out of the picture. This guy is going to only get what he's got invested. And the seller gets the rest. Okay? Well, suppose, first of all, that this seller doesn't even want to take... You know, I figured it up, by the way. The seller is giving up $38,000 worth of payments for $25,000 in cash. On the other hand, it takes him 52 months to get the payments, doesn't it? Time value of money. Cash today is worth a lot more than payments strung out over a period of time. The seller has to have this need for this cash, or they're not going to accept this. And sometimes the seller's just going to want to see you come out of pocket with some money. It's not a problem, is it? Can you come out of pocket with some money when you know a few days later you're going to get it back plus?
If you're working with a conventional lender that will loan 70-75% loan to value or an investor, then you couldn't sell the paper if the seller was willing to take back a second, because they would be in second position, right?
You can sell a second mortgage, but nobody's going to buy it higher than a 75% loan to value ratio. You want me to explain that? Didn't mean to turn this into a paper course, but let's do it. All right. Let's say we got a $100,000 value. Let's say a $100,000 sales price. All right. And there is a $50,000 first mortgage. And you sell a house for $10,000. I mean $10,000 down and the seller takes back a $40,000 second. This is a second. This is a first. This is a down payment. All right? Now you go to try to sell off his $40,000 second. Any portion of this $40,000 that is above $25,000 is absolutely worthless to a note buyer. What do I need to be to create a 75% loan-to-value ratio? I got a $50,000 first. $25,000 added to that gets me at a 75% loan-to-value ratio, does it not? 50 plus 25 is 75,000. 75,000 to 100,000 is 75%. No note buyer that I've ever met is going to buy anything above 75% LTV. So that means he's only really concerned about the $25,000 below. But here's what's going to happen. Let's say this $40,000 mortgage has a $400 a month payment. I don't know, for 15 years. What he's going to do is he's going to take his calculator and he's going to put that $400 payment in there. He's going to put 15 years worth of them in there, 180 of them. He's going to plug in his 15% yield. If it comes out above $25,000, let's say that the answer to that came out to $28,000. He's going to take $3,000 right off that 28 and whack it down because he knows that that is the absolute most he's going to pay for that note. Anything above that 28, he ain't coming out of pocket with because it puts him higher, 75% loan to value. Does that make any sense? Let's add some power to your close here. And this is powerful, folks, and I've used this time and time and time again. Incidentally, if you do not have some kind of financial calculator, you need to get yourself one. I don't care what kind it is. I don't have any piece of any of them. I use an HP 12C. A lot of people use a Texas Instrument. I don't care what you use. Texas Instruments are cheap. This HP 12C that I'm holding in my hand here is an amazing computer in this little old teeny case. This thing is a wizard. You can take this and you can compute the interest portion of the 232nd payment if you so chose. You can run an amortization schedule across this screen. Do you need to know how to do all that crap? Nuh-uh. All you need to do is work this line right across here where it says N, I, PV, PMT, and FV. If you can work that, I mean, if you want to be a wizard on this thing, that's fine. But I've had this thing for 8 years, and that's the only line I've ever used, the only thing I ever wanted to know. And that Texas Instrument will compute the same thing. There's going to be times when you're going to want to know how many number of payments are left. There's going to be times when you're going to want to know the interest rate or the present value. In other words, what is the balance on the loan now? And there's going to be times when you're going to want to compute payments. That's what you're going to use most. When you're creating financing to go back to the seller, you're going to want to compute payments. And that's what you're going to use it for. Then there's going to be times when you're going to want to compute, well, what is this money worth 10 years and now invested at 10%? You can do all of that by just working those 5 buttons right there. And that's really all you need to know. I could give you a course on that in 15 minutes. If you know any 3 of the 4 ingredients, you just solve for the 4th. Yeah. Well, in this case, you just press payment. That's why I like this one. The HP 12C, you don't compute anything. You just press the button you want it to do. See, it's even simpler than yours. And I like simple. So now, where were we? I'm not going to steal your calculator. Show the seller how much they will still be owed after the payments they sell are now collected and the note reverts back to him. When you show a seller that you can sell off several payments and then they're owed almost as much as they were to begin with, it is incredibly powerful. And let's just look at this. To figure the balance, follow the following steps. Subtract the number of payments. If I'm going to sell off 52 payments out of a 360-month note, how many does that leave? 308. Now, you don't need this financial calculator to do that. All right? I know that if I'm selling 52, at the end of the 52 term, there will be 308 payments left, so I put in my calculator 308 in for number remaining. And then I put in the payment, 665.30. And then I put in the 7% note rate, because you're trying to compute the loan balance. You have to go with the note rate now that is on the note. And then I solve for present value. And folks, this note that I owe this seller after this $100,000 note now that I owe this seller, after 52 payments of $665 have been made to the seller is still owed $95,000. So when this 52 payments expires, the seller still has $95,000 coming. And that's after they've already received $25,000 for those 52 payments, isn't it? Is that strong? Do you realize, Ray, that I'm going to put $25,000 in your hands now, and 52 payments from now you're still going to be owed 95? He just looks to me like you're getting 25 grand for 5,000. Doesn't it? Well, that's the way it works out, folks. I'm going to tell you, when you show sellers that, their eyes light up. Their eyes light up. But man, I can get 25 now, 52 months from now, I'm still owed 95. If I want to, I can go sell off another 52 payments and get another 25. That's true. That's absolutely true.
Isn't he getting 25 for 5?
Yeah. Well, isn't he? Sort of. He's actually given up $38,000 worth of payments for 25 grand. Isn't he? But the truth is, if he's owed 100 now, and 52 months from now he's still owed 95, isn't he wrong? He's only giving up 5 grand the way I look at it. No, that's not compounding, no. Yeah. Time value of money, absolutely. Y'all ought to study the time value of money. It's incredible. Okay. A list of paper buyers will be included in here, so you won't have any trouble selling them. And as I said, we're going to do a special report on how to use a calculator. All right, let's talk about why we should deal in higher price range houses. As I said when I started, when I'm dealing in owner financing in this world, or I'm dealing in lease options, I only want to deal in higher priced houses. I don't want no cheap stuff, and then we're going to find out why right now. Number one, you get a bigger upfront profit on the down payment. Ladies and gentlemen, if I'm selling a $50,000 house for $50,000 and I'm owner financing it and I'm getting $5,000 down, and I'm selling a $150,000 with owner finance, $150,000 house, and I'm owner financing it for $15,000 down, do you think I'm going to have more trouble getting the 15 or the 5? The answer is the 5. I'm going to have more trouble getting the 5. One of the advantages of dealing in higher priced houses is you're going to run across buyers with more money. And the higher price house you get, the more that's going to be true. If you have your choice of collecting $5,000 or $15,000 with the same amount of work in the same amount of time, which one do you take? Do you need a minute? Isn't it true that it's just as easy and fast to sell that 150 for 15 down as it is to sell that 50 for 5? It's probably easier and quicker. So I'm asking you, if you have a chance to get more for doing the same, why would you even consider putzing around in these junkers, these crap, this scum of the earth houses, even if they are in good shape? The answer is because it's in your comfort zone. Right? Hello? Isn't it? I mean, you know, the number $50,000 just looks safer than the 150. If I'm giving a $10 deposit to a seller to buy a $50,000 house, and I'm giving a $10 deposit to a seller buying $150, which one is more risky? You see, it doesn't matter, does it? So once we get over this fear of loss thing, we will realize that if I deal in the higher price stuff, I get a chance to make more money, and I don't have any way of losing any more than if I deal in the low price stuff. So let's continue and see if we can find some other advantages of doing that. You get a larger spread on the monthly payment. Gosh, common sense will tell you that it's easier to get a bigger spread on the 150 than the 50. I mean, what's the absolute most that you can command on a monthly payment on a $50,000 house, do you think? $550 maybe? What kind of monthly payment do you command on 150? $1,300, $1,400? Mathematics will tell you that when you're dealing in larger numbers, you have a better chance of getting a larger spread. You get bigger back-end profits, same thing. You think there's a better chance of making a bigger chunk of money on 150 or the 50? Obvious, isn't it? The more of the buyer's money you get, the less chance you have of buyer default and vandalism. And here's something that I got to drive home. Where do you have all the problems with owner financing? With your buyers? In the junk. If you're out here selling $50,000 houses to people and getting $5,000 down payments or less, you're dealing with people who are in a very low income bracket. You're dealing with buyers that doesn't take much to go wrong in their life before the world's going to cave in on them and they're not going to be able to make these payments. If they were in a higher income bracket, they wouldn't be living in the $50,000 house to begin with. So you're dealing in a section of the population that is just prone for trouble. Turn that around and make this a $150,000 house. Do people, number one, who buy $150,000 houses, just by the nature of it, have to have a larger income? Yes, because the payments are larger. It's usually a two-income family, and they have to have more monthly income. It takes more to go wrong in their life. They're usually more sophisticated buyers. They're usually better financially trained and equipped, and it takes more to happen before they have a problem that becomes your problem. It is my experience that your problems arise in your cheap stuff. When you deal in the higher price stuff, your problems are far and fewer in between. And one of the biggest reasons why you'll have less problems in the higher priced houses is because you get more of the buyer's money in your hand up front. And the more of the buyer's money you get up front, the less chance you're going to have of the buyer defaulting. By the way, it might have occurred to you that the more of the buyer's money you get up front, the less you care if the buyer defaults. When you go selling $50,000 houses for $2,000 down, you lay awake at night wondering when they're going to quit making payments. When you sell $150,000 houses for $20,000 down, you lay awake at night hoping they'll quit making payments. You'll have a lot less competition from other investors because other investors are scared too by the larger number. Because they haven't been trained. I shouldn't tell you that. You won't tell them about me then, will you? You'll be one of only a few choices in their city for your buyers to find quality houses with non-qualifying financing, and boy is that ever true. Think with me now. If somebody wants to buy a house with owner financing that doesn't require qualifying, where are all of those available? In the high price stuff or the low price stuff? All in the low price stuff. They're all available by all the landlords and people, investors who can't get rid of their crap, so they put on the market for owner financing. How much of an opportunity does an owner-occupant get to buy a $150,000, $200,000, $250,000 house that requires no bank qualifying, that is in a gorgeous area, a gorgeous condition, that is not a project that has some kind of malfunction with it? They don't get very much of a chance to do that, do they? So aren't we saying here that we're supplying a commodity that we virtually have no competition for? That's true. You have no competition supplying gorgeous houses to non-qualifying buyers. Now, if you have no competition, folks, doesn't it stand to reason that you're going to have a slew of people at your doorstep wanting to buy? Because you're it. And if you have a slew of people at your doorstep wanting to buy, don't you get to pick and choose who you want to sell to? Therefore, when we're dealing in no qualifying deals and we're supplying lovely housing with reasonable payments and reasonable down payments, we don't take no crap from buyers. We make the rules. It's our way or the highway. Well, I sound tough, don't I? I am, but not near as tough as I sound. I'm just case hardened. If you wish to keep some houses for growth in the depreciation increase in dollars much faster on higher priced properties. Doesn't stand to reason that a $200,000 house appreciates in dollars faster than a $50,000 house. Maybe at the same rate, but we're assuming it's not in L.A. If it's going to appreciate, it's going to appreciate faster. Okay? You get bigger paydays when you discount bigger notes. What a surprise, huh? The more you owe, the bigger the discount. Okay, we've talked about why should a seller discount, and we've shown that by making it, just pointing a few things out to the seller, that it would be make sense for them to discount, if not just because they wanted to cash, but because economically it makes sense always to have cash today rather than payments over an extended period of time. Let's talk about why do some sellers agree to accept installments in the first place. Obviously, folks, when you're asking a seller to take back a mortgage or note on a property, the only way they're going to accept that is if they don't need the cash. And if they don't need the cash, they may agree to it. Now, if you're trying to buy a property from an owner occupant, and you're trying to create some seller financing, and they can't accept installments, or they won't accept installments, and there's no other way you can buy it, then you should switch into the lease option mode. When I get a seller to take back a note, it's because I've asked the sellers the questions that we're going to go through here in a minute, and the seller has agreed that they would consider that. And only then would we got to that point to begin with. So they don't need the cash, or they're not going to owner finance for you. Sometimes there's tax consequences of a seller selling a house and getting paid in cash. It's up to you to point out to them, have you checked with your accountant to see what the tax consequences of this sale would be? If it is their residence, there probably isn't any tax consequences. If it's not their residence, there most likely, assuredly, is strong tax consequences, and they may have not thought that through. They like the monthly income. A lot of people just like the monthly payments. They like the idea that they can sit back and do nothing and get monthly payments. Some elderly folks don't want their children to get the cash to squander. Now, I've run across that quite often. Buying a house from an elderly individual, and they feel like if they get the cash, they don't need the cash many times. They feel like they're just going to leave it to their children. They'd rather set up a schedule of monthly payments where their children get their monthly income and they don't have any other choice. Because their children are probably like our children. They get their hands on money and they're going to go through it quickly. And they understand that, so they're setting it up so that they can't get it all in one lump sum. Cash is less important to them than getting the house sold for any number of the following reasons and others. Number one, they're relieved of the underlying debt. In example number 2 a while ago, we talked about taking over an existing debt and giving the seller back payments for their balance of their equity. Not only did they get a monthly income, but they were also relieved of a monthly outgo. So they won on both fronts. The minute the seller sells the house to me and I start making payments to them, they don't have to worry about taxes and insurance anymore. It becomes my problem, not their problem. They are relieved of maintenance responsibilities. They don't have to worry about maintaining this property. And I'm going to tell you, that's a big deal to elderly folks. They don't want to worry about maintenance. To finalize a divorce settlement, they'd rather take payments than have this house stand between them and getting this divorce settlement done and getting rid of each other. They'll do what it takes to get it done. By the way, when you're doing a divorce case and you're dividing the payment, 2 different people are getting it. Here's something you suggest. Say, look, let's create one mortgage on the property, and then we'll create 2 notes. I owe you $50,000. Let's just create 2 $25,000 notes, and then I'll make a payment to each of you, so one of you don't have to get it and pay the other. They like that. Get the house out of their name to avoid pending judgments. People who are getting sued know that soon they're going to get a judgment against them and it will attach to their property. People who are getting sued haven't learned asset protection, or that wouldn't be a problem, would it? They haven't heard Sean. It's so easy to avoid that problem. But they think that if they don't do something quick, they're going to lose whatever they can get out of their house, so they'd rather get rid of it now. So they feel like they're spiting their creditors, which in fact they are. Qualify for a loan on another house. How many times do you think you're going to run across somebody who has got another house about ready to close, or they got one built that they're about ready to move into? They need to get rid of this payment in order to qualify for a payment on a loan that they can't get unless they do. The minute that you create a debt instrument to a seller and say they are collecting X number of dollars per month, that adds to their income column and offsets that debt, and therefore they may qualify for that new loan. Now let's examine that for a moment, by the way. If I'm leasing Carol's house from her and I'm paying her $1,000 a month, and she's going to apply for a loan, how much of that $1,000 will that lender give her credit toward her income? $750. Because he knows there's expenses involved in operating rental property. But on the other hand, if Carol has sold me the house and she has a $1,000 a month payment coming to her, how much credit does she get? $1,000. So it does in fact relieve her of the debt and add to her income column, helping her to qualify for a new loan. Sometimes they would rather take their equity in payments than risk losing it to foreclosure that is pending. It's time to take the solution that I've offered them rather than hope for another solution and maybe wind up with nothing. And sometimes they just want to move to another state. They get the house sold, whatever it takes, it takes. They want to go home to their roots, and getting there is more important than the best deal they can make on the house that they're selling. Folks, if you've never been in the position of a motivated seller, believe me, you can't think like one. How many of you have ever been motivated sellers? A few of you. Okay? You can think like them. If you've never been one, it's hard to think like one. Sometimes the motivation to sell a house far and exceeds common sense. And that's true. I've been there, folks. I'm telling you, I've done some weird things just to get rid of houses. I've sold with zero interest loans. I've sold with nothing down in zero interest loans. I've done all kinds of things just to get rid of the problem. Getting rid of the problem was more important to me than every dime I could squeeze out of the deal. And when you're out here in the real world, turning up real deals with real people, you'll find that that's the case many, many, many times. The problem is more important that they get rid of it than every dime or the best deal they can possibly make on the house. And you'll also find that most of the time, the problem has nothing to do with the house. The problem is right in the seller's mind, or possibly with the occupant in the house. There's no such thing as a problem house. It's usually problem people. Well, there is such a thing as a problem house. Problem sitting on the side of the hill in L.A. It might be a problem house. Actually, more like a problem hill. Yeah. But usually the problem is in the people, not in the house. Target properties for us to look at. Okay, I want properties in the higher price ranges. That means I want them valued at $75,000 and up with no maximum range. The higher the better, and we've talked about that. They should be in good condition, needing very little or no work. I prefer no work. And many times I've asked the seller to do a little bit of work that needs to be done before I buy the house. Located in quality residential areas with no adverse surroundings that would hamper the sale. In other words, if there's a pig farm next door, bad candidate. If it's sitting close to a toxic waste dump, if they're manufacturing paint down the street and the odor consumes the area, not a very good candidate. You don't want any projects. I want you to find houses that don't have any hurdles to overcome, because there's so many out there. There's so many good deals sitting out there. Why work with projects? I want this to be an easy business. I don't want to have to solve people's problems that are too hard for me to solve. If they're not easy for me to solve, I don't want to do it. I like doing things easy. I like shooting fish in a barrel. and like the barrel to be empty with nothing but fish in it, no water. And then I want to use a bazooka to make sure I don't miss. No projects. If it's too hard, I'd rather not do it, because it just takes away your income producing energy. It can be vacant or occupied if the seller intends to move shortly. Obviously, you can't sell a house if the seller's still in it and intends to stay in it. So if the seller don't want to move, I don't want the deal. I prefer it to be vacant when I'm looking at it. But if not, it needs to be vacant shortly thereafter. Why in the world I need to get involved? I don't. Unless, of course, the seller for some reason would like for me to take title to the property now just so they know it's sold. And as long as they're sitting in there, incidentally, if a seller is willing to give you a house for little or no money, and they want to sit in it for a while and make the payments, do you have a problem with that? Like, well, I'll only take it if you move out, you know. If you're going to give me this house, I want it vacant. You might try that, but I'll tell you right now, when somebody's willing to give you a house in good condition in a good area, and they want to live there for a while, make the payments, maybe you shouldn't argue with them. Maybe you should just take it. What do you got to lose? Remember, if you don't have anything to lose, it's hard to lose. Remember that. Put yourself in a position to where you can't lose, or if you do, you lose very small, and you won't have any trouble making these decisions. Because you'll always be asking yourself, well, the worst case scenario is I lose my investment. And since that was nothing, don't look like a big loss to me. Will be owned by an individuals, not institutions, usually the current or previous occupants. This is directly opposite of the wholesale business. In the wholesale business or in the retail business, I prefer institutionally owned properties. In this business, I don't want institutionally owned properties. You're not going to create seller financing with institutionally owned properties. And if you do, you don't want it. So stay away from anything that is not owned by individuals. And usually, they live in it or they used to. The equity structure will fall into one of the following categories. All right, number one, the seller will have considerable equity with one or more underlying loans. We talked about that in our example. You're going to find a lot of those. Number two, the house will be free and clear. You're going to find more of those than you imagine. And number three, the very little equity, the seller's main motivation is debt relief. In many cases, the motivation is a small amount of cash, and the seller could care less about the debt because they're ready to abandon the property and the debt.